My name is Greg McCoach, editor of the Mining Speculator. Be here for 20 minutes, and then following me will be two of my companies on my newsletter on the panel, Evergold and EMX Royalty. So after myself, they'll each present 10 minutes, and then we'll dismiss to the back room to do the question and answers for anyone who wants to attend. So yeah, here we go. Wanted to make reference to an excellent presentation I saw. I've shared this with others, and they've called me back and they've said, "My gosh, Greg, thanks for sending that." This is a scholar guy, scholar level type person who did a presentation, The Energy Transition Delusion, Inescapable Mineral Realities. He goes through and gives a 56-minute presentation on, for him as a scholar, to use the word delusion, right? The delusion that we are going to transition to electric by such and such a date is absolutely, a falsehood. It's not going to happen, because the mineral realities that it would take, the amount of critical battery metals that would need to be produced to reach these goals is absurd. It's not going to happen. And he points out that these stated goals by the politicos will be pushed back, and almost indefinitely, because there's such a large gap. And it led me into some other research. If anybody hasn't seen this, I'd highly recommend watching it. But a word about base metals. I've always been bullish on the precious metals, but I'm very bullish once again on the base metals. In my view, not just battery metals like copper, nickel, cobalt, lithium, vanadium will need to see a dramatic rise in price, but also the base metals as well, similar to what happened in the 2001, 2003 timeframe, when we were finding out about the new Chinese economic miracle and all the metals that would be needed to build their infrastructure that they were talking about. And it was a good time for us in the mining stocks. We made a lot of money during that period. This time around, I see the price increase in base metals could put us into a super bull market again, just like that 3-year period back then. But I think it's going to be much, much greater than that. Possibly a super bull market in base metals for years to come, possibly even a decade. Wouldn't that be something? These last 10 years, I've been writing my newsletter for 23 years. The first 12 years, we were making a ton of money. The market was mostly up during those years with few downturns. I look at the last 11 years, just the opposite. We've been in this frustrated, down market so much of the time with only a few blips up where we make the money. So I think that's about to change. That's the good news, that, the longer the negative happens, the greater the upside is. And this is what I see. When's that going to happen? I wish I had a crystal ball, could tell you. And it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's just a matter of when. So why do I say this? I think the lack of investment into our space the last 10 years and the time frame required to bring new metals to production, even in a good jurisdiction, is 8 years. And in jurisdictions not so good, it could take 15, 20 years. So obviously there's a huge disconnect in society here with the building blocks of modern society, not just in the electric vehicle market, but in the base metals in general. Everybody knows how bullish I am on precious metals, and I usually use these conferences to state that narrative, but I'm taking a different approach this way. I'm talking about some different things. Personally, I'm most bullish on gold, silver, and copper. I just think that's where the biggest money is going to be made in this super bull market, but there's going to be all kinds of different items like lithium, depending on how this electrical vehicle market turns out. I think there's still issues there. This whole climate change thing, I don't want to get into that rabbit hole right now, but there's some basics that people are coming to grips with, and that is that a Tesla electric car sitting on the showroom floor, the carbon footprint of that as it sits after it's been produced is equal to a diesel truck running 80,000 kilometers, okay? So again, this climate change thing, yes, climate is changing, but I think it's mostly due to the changes of the earth and not man-made climate change. I really don't see how we're going to change it ourselves. The earth will go through its different periods, but that's another discussion that I don't want to get into. So today I'm just trying to help people be forewarned. I see inflation as something that people need to get educated on, because you're going to be affected by this in a very big way. And a big part of adapting to inflation, avoiding its hazards, and even profiting from it is knowing what to expect. And I listen to different opinions and different things, and I just see people are missing the boat on what's about to happen here. So in order to do this, we must study the inflations of the past. And just some books, in case you ever want to do this study, it'll really help you understand what is about to happen. Fiat money inflation in France, Andrew Dixon White, The Great Inflation, William Gutman, 40 Centuries of Wage and Price Controls, Schrödinger, What Has Government Done to Your Money, Murray Rothbard, and my two favorites, Fisher's Concise History of Economic Bungling, Antoine Fisher, and Economics in One Lesson, Henry Hazlitt. After you read these type of books and you study these inflations, there's the same pattern in this. And the pattern is repeating yet again. So it's not going away. Anybody that thinks inflation's going away, it's not. Richard Maybury just gave a quote talking about some of these books that I just mentioned. He said, if these books were required reading for every high school student in America, we'd return to freedom and abundance, and the typical citizen would be more wealthy and secure. But as we know, inflation is an insidious process that steals from the average citizen. They just don't quite see it. So a joke about a government economist. A government economist applies for a job. The interviewer asks, what's 2 + 2? The economist gets up, locks the door, draws the shades, sits back down, leans in and whispers, what do you want it to be? That's just, the way government works. There's so much deception in the statistics and what they want you to believe from what is actually in your best interest. So in all great inflations, beware of debt. During big inflations, if you lock in your costs, inflation works for you. If you don't lock in your costs, inflation works against you. Well, what exactly is inflation? Inflation is expanding the money supply, which causes the money to lose value and prices to rise. Inflation is controlled by government officials, or in the case of counterfeiters, private criminals. But wait, aren't these two one and the same? But I digress. When you study inflation, government does not speak to inform, Feds speak to achieve an effect. If the data are true and likely to spark the desired effect they wish, then that's fine. But if it's not, they can easily be seasonably adjusted. These words they use, seasonably adjusted, it's always the same. It's the same group of people that come up with these terms. Seasonably adjusted, quantitative easing, critical race theory, stakeholder capitalism, always designed to keep you off from understanding what's actually happening, what the truth is. As an example, government can pull the rug out from under you at any moment at the drop of a hat. As an example of this is, let's say you buy a house for $1 million, expecting to wait a year and sell it for $2 million. We saw that happen in the last few years. You borrow the $1 million, but unknown to you or anyone else, the counterfeiters at the Federal Reserve have become afraid that rising prices they are causing will trigger riots. A few weeks later, after you close the deal, these people at the Fed slam on the brakes and stop inflating. Before you sell the house, it plunges to $800,000. My business partner, back 3.5 years ago, bought a house in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho for $800,000. He passed away, and before he passed away, he asked me if I'd help his wife, just sort through some financial stuff. And so what happened, she was living in that house, and she didn't have a for sale sign on it, but she kept getting realtors calling her, would you sell that house for 2.6, 2.8, 3.2? Got to 3.6, she called me, Greg, what should I do? I said, sell it as fast as humanly possible. Take the money and run. And of course, she was smart enough. She listened to me. She sold it for 3.6. They can't even get 2.2 for it now. Okay? That's because what's the Fed doing? They're raising interest rates, and I'll explain here. So a few weeks later, after you close the deal, so you sell a house, it plunges to 800,000. Throughout history, this sort of thing has happened over and over and over again. It's the same thing. The government does the same thing when they create money out of thin air, pump it into the system. We go through this over and over. In fact, it happened in 2008, and it's happening again now in the deflation of the recent real estate bubble. When you study inflations, as I have, never have they gone from no inflation to runaway inflation. It's in stages, and there's this back and forth thing that happens. In every case, before they go hog wild with the money creation again, the power junkies at the Fed have pumped the brakes. So this pumping of the brakes is all part of this. So far, the Fed is again clearly following the pump the brakes pattern, which is not an if, only when they're going to do it and how much, okay? As we have seen time and time again, the Fed will continually kick the can down the road. We just don't know how often and how far they're going to kick it. But it's coming. The interest rates that they're raising interest rates to try to slow the rate of inflation, which they created, right? They make it sound like it's some boogeyman out there. The Fed created the inflation. You got to understand that. And the raising of interest rates has put the U.S. government now in such a pickle, and this is worldwide with any government that's doing this. They're all doing it. The amount of interest we were paying at zero interest rates on the government debt was around $600 to $700 billion a year in interest. Okay, every point of interest adds $200 to $300 billion a year in additional interest. So we're up to what, 5%? They'll probably go maybe another point. Next year, we're going to be paying $2 trillion a year in interest. That's game over. That's game over. Okay? And that's another rabbit hole I don't want to go down, but I just had to mention it. Okay? So another reason to shun debt, it makes one inflexible. In other words, the more debt you have, the harder it is to roll with the punches that the governments of the world incessantly throw at us during these inflations. But again, borrowing on a small scale to take advantage of inflation has worked out so often for so many, and I understand that that could be something you want to try to do. But what we're seeing in the big picture is a problem. Let me explain. So what comes next? In my view, the politicians and the central banks will continue to pump the brakes for now, raising the interest rates. But the so-called recession they keep talking about will truly be a deflation that lets all the air out of the bubbles in real estate and stocks first before the hyperinflation kicks into high gear. And that hyperinflation is coming. From my study of inflations throughout history, it is unavoidable. It is coming. So you prepare, and what you should own is the commodities. This space is going to be in a super bull market, and you are going to make a lot of money when a lot of other people are going to be getting hurt, unfortunately, very badly. I'm an optimist by nature, but I refer to myself as a pragmatic optimist. I don't bury my head in the sand just because I want something to happen. It's just the realities of our world and what governments do. So some closing thoughts. Be aware that a report of, say, January 2023 of 6.4% inflation really means 6.4% above those of January 2022. But it's also additive. Do you understand? On top of those of 2021, 2020, and so forth and so on, right? You see how they deceive? They want people to believe that inflation is only this, but when you add up the last 3 years, it's well over 20%. And anybody can see that. You know, my son, tells me, Dad, what do they mean? When they say the inflation is only this, the grocery store prices are clearly way above that, right? Anybody can see that. So, therefore, inflation is always far worse than it appears because it builds like lava flowing out of a volcano. It also means investments that tend to benefit from inflation, such as precious metals, energy, real estate, will move much, much higher. Now, real estate, you're saying, Greg, aren't you saying real estate's going down? The bubble is going to be withdrawn? The air's coming out? Yes. Real estate's going to go to shockingly low levels. But in the hyperinflation, it should rebound, okay? What I'm saying is that if you play this right, there's a moment coming here when you look at 68% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck with no savings, on average, credit card and installment loan debt of up to $120,000 per household. And the credit card data clearly shows people are living off their credit cards right now with no savings. So what happens in a hyperinflation? We're already starting to see it. Large amounts of layoffs. What's going to happen when 68% of the population has no savings, all this debt, and all of a sudden they lose their job? There's a hell of a lot of real estate going to be on the market for whatever they can get, and banks will foreclose. And I've met with bankers, very high-level bankers, who have told me, Greg, it won't be like 2008, where they were trying to hold on, get the best price. What happened? They learned a terrible lesson. Nobody's living in the house, the pipes freeze, the water goes all over the house. No one even knows about it until someone walks in 3 months later. Mold damage, $250,000 remediation. They're not going to hold property. If you have cash, they are going to give you the keys to the house. If you want to invest in real estate, there's going to be a great moment coming for those who have cash. How should you hold your cash? In physical gold until that moment comes. So remember, a far more reliable reflection of actual conditions is what we're seeing, is prices. A price is more than a statistic, it's an event. What's happening to the prices? It's an event. Trust with your eyes and other real events more than you trust government statistics, because they are designed to deceive. The reason you should study inflations of the past is because they do tend to repeat, and what I see coming is a repeat of 2008, but only much, much worse this time. There's good news and bad news in that, depending how you understand things and how you prepare. There's a great opportunity. I think the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world is about to take place, which will lead to a super bull market in commodities, and especially precious metals, because ultimately, whatever they come up with, their CBDC product, the central bank digital currency, I believe it'll be backed with gold. And that's why gold's going to be the asset to own, and anything related to precious metals. So with that, I will turn it over to, sorry, 2 more slides. What does that mean for gold? 1 share of the Dow and 1 ounce of gold will be on a ratio of 1 to 1 again, okay? Just like it was in 1980. Okay, where should the two meet? I really can't say, but the ratio will be met in the coming years. Now, Dow's at 33,000, gold's at 1860. Right now, that's an 18 to 1 ratio. I'm telling you, gold and the Dow are going to be one-on-one. Mark my words. My 2 newsletters, The Mining Speculator, The Insider Alert, been doing this 23 years. I think this is probably going to be the greatest opportunity to make money we've ever seen. And thank you for listening.